Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupad Purnamamsa Paripurajaka Ashtottara Sri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Adanta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Nama Charja Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kundigiri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Welcome to all, especially Lakshmi Mohan Mataji, welcome. And Meena Mataji. And the first question is whether I'm sounding too soft in volume. Are we okay or we're okay? All right. Om Jnana Timirantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurn Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadhati Shapadantikam Vande Hang Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamalang Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Shahagana Raganatan Vitam Stam Sujivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vansha Kolpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Again, welcome to all. Yesterday on our Bhagavatam class, we were discussing Apichet Sudaracharo, and the discussion sort of came up just toward the end of the class. So I said, well, okay, we'll take it up next time. But I thought, well, it suits our Thursday format, taking up sort of no holds barred questions and controversies and so on. So I thought we could continue with that discussion now, if that suits you. Or we can pick it up Friday as promised. today, Friday? Other topics you'd rather talk about today? It's all up to you. We're a little democratic on Thursdays.
What do you think, Tulsi Priya? You raised the question, actually.
It doesn't matter to me. I had initially asked the question. I thought that I would postpone it for today. But I'm not the only one in this gathering, so whatever everybody else wants to do, I'm up for. My only, I guess if we are going to go into it, then I feel kind of honor bound to try to bring up as many, and I don't want to use the word devil's advocate positions as I don't really mean devil's advocate, but just
On Thursday, even the devil is welcome.
okay. I guess what I'm saying is that I would like to have a very thorough understanding, and so that might entail asking some stupid questions or maybe apparently obstinate questions, just because I've heard so many different things from all different sides, and it almost seems like when certain issues arise, there's no way, it almost seems like there's no way of coming to a resolution. And in my mind, I'm churning my brain trying to come to a resolution for people, and I don't see it happening. So that's why I would like to bring up the different angles of vision.
Different angles of vision may be more helpful than resolutions.
Yeah.
Okay. Looks like we're into it. And that's fine, questions and objections and devil's advocates and all of that. Prabhupada said we should discuss Shastric, discuss Srimad Bhagavatam threadbare from every angle of vision. So this is Bhagavad Gita, same thing. Let's start then with the commentary. Baladev and Vishnath are pretty much on the same page, which is not surprising that the guru and the disciple are on the same page. But let's start with Vishwanath. Of course, we're in Bhagavad Gita in 9th chapter, and in text 29. Let me see if I can move this. Yeah, I'll move this so I can see you and still read. In text 29, the Lord is saying how he's equal to everyone. Samoham sarvabhuteshu. He doesn't hate anyone. He doesn't favor anyone. Then we come to 30. Api chet sudaracharo bhajate mam ananyapak sadhureva samantavya samyag vyavasito hisaha. So this is 9:30. Even if the most sinful person worships me with no other desire than to please me, I consider that person to be my devotee, since he has fixed himself completely in me. This is Banu Maharaj's translation of Baladev and Vishwanath, starting with Vishwanath. And that's the translation that Banu Maharaj was given. Now the commentary, my attachment to my devotee is my very nature. That attachment does not decrease, even if the devotee commits wrong. For I make him come up to the highest standard. If someone with bad conduct, addicted to violence, thievery, or adultery, sudarachar, worships me and worships no one except me, and does not follow any other process like karma or gyan, and has no other desire than my desire, ananyapak, he is my devotee, sadhu. Then the objector speaks up, but considering his bad conduct, how is he a devotee? He is to be respected, and this is in quotes, this is Krishna speaking. He is to be respected, mantavya, as a devotee, because of his devotee qualities. It is a command. Not doing so is an offense. My order is the authority. So he should be considered a devotee in that portion where he worships you, and as a non-devotee in that position where he commits adultery. Krishna says, no, he should be considered as a devotee, eva. Eva means certainly. He should be considered a devotee in all his parts. You should not see his bad qualities at all. He is completely convinced, samyak vyavasitaha. He makes a splendid resolution. I will go to hell for my sinful actions, which are hard to give up, but I will not give up dedicated worship of Krishna. Then text 31 comes up, and the Vishwanath has the dialogue continue. Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvach chantim nigachchati kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. Very quickly, he becomes a righteous person and becomes completely devoid of contamination. O son of Kunti, please declare that my devotee never perishes. And then the director says, how can you accept the worship of such a sinful person? How can you eat the food and drink offered by a heart contaminated with lust and anger? And Krishna replies, very quickly he becomes righteous. And Vishwanath comments, the present is used, present tense, and not the future, to express the fact that having committed sin, by remembering the Lord, he becomes repentant, and thus very quickly becomes righteous. Oh, how unfortunate I am. There's no one as low as I, bringing bad name to the devotees. Repeatedly, Shashvat, he feels completely, ni for nitaram, completely disgusted, shantim, with his actions, completely disgusted, shantim. So, or the use of the present tense can indicate that in the future he will develop righteousness fully. But even right now, it exists in a subtle form. After taking medicine, though the destructive effects of fever or poison remain for some time, it is not to be considered a serious condition. Thus, with the entrance of bhakti in his mind, the sinful actions are not taken seriously, and the traces of sin, such as lust and anger, should be considered insignificant, like the biting of a toothless snake. Thus he attains nigachchati, complete cessation of lust and anger, shantim, permanently, shashvat. In nigachchati, ni stands for nitaram, completely. This means that even during the stage of having a tendency to commit sin, he has a pure heart. If he eventually becomes righteous, there should be no argument. There would be no argument. However, if a devotee is sinful right up till his death, what is his position? The Lord, affectionate to his devotees, then speaks loudly with a little anger. O son of Kunti, my devotee is not destroyed. At the time of death, he does not fall to a lower position. But arguers with harsh tongues will not respect this. Krishna then encourages the worried, lamenting Arjuna. So this is Arjuna who's objecting. He's encouraging Arjuna. O Kuntiya, going to the squabbling assembly with a tumultuous sound of drums, throwing your hands in the air, you should fearlessly declare this. Declare what? Declare that my devotee, the devotee of the Supreme Lord, though committing sin, does not perish, but rather reaches success. Arguments defeated, pride defeated, they should undoubtedly respect you as a guru. This is Sridhar Swami's explanation. And then, but why does the Prabhupada has explained this before, but why does the Lord order Arjuna to declare this when he could do it himself? Personally, he will say later, Mam evaishyasya satyam te pratijane priyosi me. In the same way, why does he not say, I declare, Kuntiya, that my devotee does not perish? The reason is explained here. The Lord considered being affectionate to my devotee and not tolerating even a slight degradation of my devotee. I will, under all circumstances, uphold the declaration made by my devotee, whereas I can break my own promise and accept criticism of myself, just as in breaking my promise in fighting with Bhishma. Thus, hearing a declaration from my mouth, materialistic disputers will laugh, but they will accept Arjuna's declaration as if it were written on a stone. Therefore, I will have Arjuna make his declaration, make the declaration. And thus, one should not accept the statements of the falsely intelligent persons who, after hearing about Ananya Bhakti, even of the greatest sinner, think this declaration made by the pure devotee cannot apply in cases where attachment to wife and children, sinful acts, lamentation, illusion, lust, anger, and other despicable qualities manifest. So that's the story there. Now let me just look a little bit. Then the next verse is Mami Partavya Pashritya Striya Sudra Tata Vaishya. And there it's, I don't think I'll read the whole purport now, but I'll just pick out the main points. It's so remarkable that my bhakti does not consider the accidental faults arising by actions of my is it so remarkable that my bhakti does not consider the accidental faults arising by actions of my misbehaving devotee? Actually, my bhakti does not even consider the inherent faults of a person which arise from his very birth. Not occasional accidental faults, but inherent faults. You know, this is what we do because this is our birth. Even those of sinful birth, Papa Yoni, outcasts or mlechas who surrender to me, attain the supreme goal. Then Vishwanath quotes Kiratu Hunandra Pulinda Pulkashai. If bhakti can deliver the outcasts, it can surely deliver women, vaishyas, or others who are impure or subject to bad qualities, such as lying. So there you have it. That's Vishwanath's commentary on these relevant verses, stated quite strongly or unequivocally. Now, Tina says, but if one is engaging in devotional service, shouldn't not engaging in abominable actions be a symptom? Yes, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavat yakinchan. All the good qualities develop in a devotee, but they may not develop all at once. There may be some discrepancy. First of all, the person may not be completely mature in devotional service, or Srila Prabhupada explains elsewhere that generally material life and spiritual life go along parallel lines, but sometimes something happens and the material life crosses over the spiritual life. There's a contradiction, as it were, or it's a contradiction.
Discrepancy,
And excuse me,
discrepancy.
yeah. More than a discrepancy, instead of going the crosses, you're not on the right path because something from your material life crossed over your spiritual life and you went off course. So even that, Srila Prabhupada summarized that by saying in the early days of 22nd Avenue, even if you see Brahmananda walking down the street smoking a cigarette, still you have to consider him saintly. Still you have to consider him saintly. Abhichet Sudarachara, very quickly he'll come to the standard. So yes, we expect to see, that's why the issue arises. Otherwise, why even the discussion, why the verse? Just say, well, devotees are spotless, they never do anything wrong, they're perfect. But here it's understood, no, sometimes devotees do something which is not only imperfect, but bad, and not only bad, but very bad. Durachar is bad, and sudurachar, su is an intensifier, really bad, abominable. Abhichet sudurachara, even if he does something really bad, abominable, but bhajate, he engages in devotional service, ananya bhak, without any other, he doesn't go to karma, he doesn't go to gyan, he doesn't say, well, let me try Lord Shiva, let me try something else. He remains fixed in his determination to serve Krishna. Sadhur eva, he must be considered. Mantavya, he must be considered. Eva, definitely a sadhu. Samyak vyavasito, he said, because he's situated properly in his determination. Yes, Tulsi Priya of the yellow hand.
Okay. So yesterday when we were talking about this, you were saying that our philosophy is radical. And I agree. And I agree it's radical. And but I was thinking that there have been examples, at least one I can think of radical, of a radical application of one's belief. And that was with the Amish. Some years ago, there was a crazy man went into an Amish school and killed some children and the teacher. And within a few days, if not the next day, the members of the Amish community went over to the murderer's home and brought food to the wife of the murderer. And when they were asked why they did that, they said, we have an obligation to forgive, and she is hurting as well. So we're here to, to comfort her. And to me, that was just mind blowing. I guess I'm bringing this up because where I'm hearing a lot of the controversy and the back and forth of opinions and anger and outrage is because sometimes these abominable actions or these bad behaviors affect other Vaishnavas. And so then they say it's not just a fall down, this is Vaishnava aparad, And so I'm wondering, I can accept completely what is being said here. Yes, we consider the person saintly because from Krishna's perspective, it's a tiny thing, it's a minor thing. But to a person who has been injured, it's not tiny, it's not minor, it's life-changing. And so it almost seems as if that if we take this instruction to consider them saintly, it practically speaking demands that we forgive if we want to, so that opens the question, where does justice come in? Where does punishment for bad behavior come in? Because it's not just Krishna's perspective, we live in a society. So how do we reconcile these different things if somebody's tremendously offended, but everybody else is seeing the same person, the offender, as saintly? Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course, you asked two questions. One was about Vaishnava aparadhs and one was about forgiveness and how things affect, well, several things. That things may seem insignificant to us or to some distant judge, but to the person affected, it's not a small thing. So that was one point. And then the discussion revolved around forgiveness and sort of, what would you say, competing concerns. On the one side, compassion for the offender, or consideration, well, the person's a devotee, and on the other side, justice and satisfaction of the demands of those who think justice needs to be applied. Does that cover all the territory there? Tulsi Priya?
I think it does.
Okay, so let's put Vaishnava aparadh to the side just for a moment. We'll come back and revisit it. But as far as justice and so on, to quote another Shastra, justice is mine, saith the Lord. We're not the persons who set things up. We're going back to Vishwanath. He says, Krishna says, I'm the authority here. They may have their resolutions, they may have their laws, they may have their whatever, but I set the standard for what's moral, for what punishment is deserved or not deserved. And here's what I'm saying. Lakshmi Moni tells us this story one time of she was with Srila Prabhupada and talking about something that wasn't supposed to be. You know that story where what Prabhupada said? Where you told Prabhupada, but Prabhupada said? You're muted. You're still muted. Yep, still muted. There
Okay.
you are.
Yeah.
Please adjust your screen, Maharaj. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can only see the top part of your head. What happened was, it was a whole thing with the eyes of the deities. And I had been told that Srila Prabhupada had requested that the deities have conch shell eyes. And the devotees didn't put him on the deities because they thought it looked weird. So when I came, I was asked to be the pujari, and I found these eyes in a box, and I thought, what are they doing here? I asked the devotees. The devotees said Prabhupada wanted them on the deities, but we didn't put them on because we thought they looked weird. And to me, that just didn't make sense. Prabhupada wanted them on, and you didn't put them on because you thought they looked weird. How does that work? You have a personal conversation with Krishna or something? So we were in a place where it was very easy to access Srila Prabhupada, and I just walked over into Prabhupada's room. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, I heard that you wanted these eyes on, and I just want to tell you that if you want them on, we'll put them on. And he said, no, Kalachandji's eyes are fine just the way they are. And I thought maybe he didn't understand me, so I repeated myself again, and he repeated himself again and said the same thing. Kalachandji's eyes are fine just the way they are. And then I tried to explain it one more time, maybe slightly differently. And Prabhupada stopped me mid-sentence. And he said, I'm Srila Prabhupada, and I'm telling you what I want. Kalachandji's eyes are fine, just the way they are.
The way I remember hearing it from you before was that you said to him, but Prabhupada said.
Yeah, well, I said that twice. I said, Prabhupada, I heard you said that you wanted these eyes. And then the third time he said, well, I'm Prabhupada, and I'm telling you what I said. What I want.
Thank you. So
Someone
in a
told me that it was like I was trying to get Prabhupada to yell at me, but that was not.
So the story came to mind because Krishna is the standard of morality, and he says, "Apichet sudaracharo." And so when Arjuna says, "Well, what about this?" But I'm Krishna, and I'm telling you, he has to be considered saintly. So, what about morality? What about wait a second, I'm the person in charge here. I'm the authority, and I say he's saintly. So that's to be considered. I'm reminded of Yudhisthira Maharaj, who was too moral to lie, and it was considered a fault in that Krishna is asking him to lie. So the higher standard of morality is to lie. There are those who say that Yudhisthira was so moral that due to his high standard of ethics, his chariot never touched the ground. But then after that incident, now his chariot touched the ground because he told a lie. And as I heard it, Srila Prabhupada took it the other way. No, because you hesitated to follow Krishna's instruction. That's why his chariot touched the ground. So it's Krishna's instruction. What are we going to do? What are we supposed to do? Prabhupada said that one time. He was talking about Namam Duskrita Namudha, and he was explaining it to one guest. And he said, "It's not my saying, it's Krishna's saying. What can I do?" So this is what God says. What are we supposed to do? Supreme Personality of Godhead is telling Arjuna, you go out, you go to the assembly and beat some drums and tell them very loudly, my devotee must be considered saintly. He never perishes. So that's one answer. And another thought that comes to mind, and I don't need to be the only speaker here, so other thoughts are welcome, and feel free to just jump in, unmute yourself or as you like. We have this incident of Ashwatthama, who behaved abominably by killing the sleeping sons of Draupadi. And Arjuna promised to kill him, and then he captured him and arrested him and brought him in, like hanging from a stick, like a captured animal. And Draupadi, release him, and Bhima, kill him. And it's going back and forth with different people on different sides. And Krishna has to discover another two arms to hold the parties in check. And then Arjuna sagaciously comes up with a decision. Okay, we're going to release him, but we'll cut off his top knot and his jewel. So because he was a Brahmin, so he shouldn't have been punished, but then something was arrived at for the, what would you say, the satisfaction of all parties. Well, are there others who would like to say something here?
The point of that, though, is that everybody was satisfied by Krishna's decision, and whereas whatever the GBC decides, practically no one is ever satisfied.
Well, till the GBC reaches the position of becoming Vishnu Tattva, that's what we have to expect. And of course, no one ever becomes Vishnu Tattva except Vishnu. So, Hare Krishna.
So
that's by the way, the penance one takes on by being a GBC man that no one's ever satisfied with, where there's always someone dissatisfied with whatever you decide.
Yeah, I wasn't implying that they ought to be or whatever. I'm just saying that's usually the case. I guess my follow-up question is then, how does this idea of accepting somebody as saintly play out with their, as to the role they possess or occupy in the society, if they're a leader or a preacher, because we're a preaching movement, and I'm not going to mention any names, people can guess if they like, but there was one person who had some accusation of child abuse, and and, you know, was a prominent member of an ISKCON center. And I used to wonder to myself, how long until people, you know, do some internet Googling, you know, do some Googling and find out all these things that are going on around this person, and that's going to affect their view of this preaching center in terms of, you know, PR and what have you. And that's not the only consideration, but I guess because we're a preaching movement, how do you explain to somebody who can't understand? I mean, it, you know, it took me a long, I mean, I remember reading this, it just didn't make sense. You know, this Apichadusudaracha, how does it make sense? And somebody's just, you know, tra la la, they did this, but, you know, everybody's like, no, he's saintly, it's okay. So how do we reconcile this when we're trying to preach to people who will not understand it first?
Yeah. Again, I'm not the only one to speak. The first thought that comes to my mind is that they don't understand half of what we do. You know, that we worship statues, that we worship plants, that we think that they didn't go to the moon. We think that scientists are rascals. You know, we have so many. If we want to mold ourselves to be reasonable and popular and acceptable to the mainstream, we're going to have real problems. But Prabhupada said, we don't want to go to their standards. We want to bring them to our standards. And that's a problem that I've seen, you know, as an amateur observer of little bits of religious history. You start off with a really radical message. And then you say, well, yeah, but people won't understand this. And people are going to have a hard time with that. And, the founder said this, but it was, you know, it'll be seen as harsh. And, you know, fast forward and you're sort of pea soup. You don't have anything to say anymore, except, yeah, we agree with you. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and so on and so on. So so we saw that Srila Prabhupada took hard decisions and stuck with them. An example that comes to my mind is when there was some statement published in BTG regarding Balabhacharya and the comment about one who doesn't follow the Swami as a prostitute. And there was an uproar. Life members in Bombay particularly were outraged, and there wasn't an internet then, but somehow or other the word was spread from person to person, and people were shredding their ISKCON Life membership cards and sending them back. And there was a huge uproar, including Sumatu Mukherjee, who's a devotee of Balabhacharya, and she was disturbed. And Srila Prabhupada didn't back down. He didn't back down. He explained things. He tried to make it, you know, he drew parallels that actually Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Balabhacharya were friends, but because, as you're disturbed, because Balabhacharya seems to be criticized, so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had to say something when Sridhar Swami was minimized. So somehow or other he, you know, tried to bring peace to the matter, but he didn't do it by backing down. Another time there was someone made a comment about the Goswamis of Vrindavan becoming hogs in their next life. And Prabhupada didn't back down from that one either. He wrote an article in BTG sort of giving credit to the Goswamis where credit was due, but not backing down. Not backing down. Is that a raised hand, Lakshmi Moni Mataji?
Yes, it was a raised hand. I think also to be considered along the lines of, quote, the devil's advocates, unquote, is what happens when people don't agree on what a sinful activity is. Because many, like for instance, Lord Indra, if Indra was an ISKCON, I wonder where he would be now. Maybe even
He
Lord
wouldn't be
Brahma
Indra,
wouldn't
that's for
be
sure.
anymore.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
And coming down from Indra and Burma, who probably would have gone through a lot of trouble, but culturally, knowing the Vedic culture, the depth of the Vedic culture, even the local culture now, what is different in one place than it is in another. So who and how is it decided? What is the sinful activity? And then has the right to, act upon that or take some kind of retribution on that situation.
Yeah, that's an additional question. How do we determine what a sinful activity is? Is it by popular?
Or what a devotee is. How do you determine what a devotee is? It's also considered an ambiguous word in some circles. So almost to the point where if you commit something abominable, then you are not a devotee. So that doesn't apply to you. Because devotees, like someone said at the beginning on the chat, that if you're a devotee, then you don't do abominable things. So if that's true, then if you do abominable things, you're not a devotee. So then the whole verse, which this discussion is just a moot point. It doesn't really apply to anybody.
I was yesterday. I came upon a court decision that was mildly interesting. It was like an 80-page decision, and I was impressed by the care that the judge put into the competing issues. And he, on this point of law and that point of law, and I can partially agree with the defendants on this and partially agree with the plaintiffs. And here the plaintiffs have just forget it, they're wrong. And here the defendants are wrong. And it was all based on law. It was all carefully researched. It took him like 2 years to write this decision, I think. It took a long time. I guess not just writing it, but in any case, my point is that devotees are supposed to be thoughtful, that is sagacious. They're supposed to know the Shastra. They're supposed to be very sober, tira. Not just that we sort of, like we're warriors with proof texts in our hands that we wave like flags as we charge forth on our horses without much thought in our minds. We're just, what's the word? Stirred to action by what we've read on the internet, and now we're ready to go for truth, justice, and the American way. These things take careful thought. I think of Giriraj Maharaj as an example of a sagacious devotee. How carefully he considers what he says, how thoughtful he is in considering issues, and almost invariably how he has something from Srila Prabhupada that's relevant to bring to bear. So that kind of intelligence and thoughtfulness and patient sobriety is needed in order to come to any kind of decision in the material world and on the spiritual platform. Just to be roused by passion may not help us very much. So that's one point. And then, as Lakshmi Moni, as you said, well, what's a devotee? What's a sin? All of these things have to be carefully thought about. Well, what is sinful activity, and who is a devotee, and what is it that we have to do? Are we becoming sinful now by acting improperly, either by not doing something or by doing the wrong thing? If we're are we ignoring Krishna's instruction? Are we following Krishna's instruction? What are we doing? Because as that person is, we're being asked to hold this person to account, but we may be held to account and we may be held to account by Krishna. What about my instruction? Did you put that aside? Or were you foolish? What? So very carefully we have to think about things. And not just think as in think, but think about Krishna's instructions, know what they are, and consulting other saintly people, and not just blown away by what will the public think, which is what will the ISKCON public think, or what will the public think. That's worth considering, but it's not our final standard of morality and truth. It's not a substitute for Bhagavad Gita.
Maharaj,
Okay.
I wasn't trying to imply that what the public would think, or for that matter, even the ISKCON public would think, is the last word in how we deal with things. But I did ask, and honestly, my head is swimming with all the different things that are being said here. And if you answered it, I'll have to go back to the class and listen again, or go back to the recording. I'm still not clear on how somebody who has, it seems that anything that involves breaking a principle or breaking a vow of one's ashram, for instance, a sannyasi who falls down, or sexual abuse of a child, things like that, it seems pretty clear that those things are something that would be considered sinful activity. Otherwise, we have
Yes,
some.
there are things where we could look at it closely and say, well, is this sinful, or is it just sort of a violation of community standards, or a violation of what are now the community standards? Those are sort of close questions, but he raped my daughter, he shot my wife. That's not even a threshold question coming there. Is it sinful or not? There's a pretty clear agreement about a lot of things.
When it does seem clear, and the offense, let's say, comes from a person in a position of leadership, how do you reconcile? I brought up the idea of public perception, but there's also the perception that it's almost like one might feel that a person in a position of power can do anything then, and we just have to consider them saintly, and they go on as before without accountability. So, and my question is, who are we accountable to? We are accountable to Krishna, but it seems like we don't have a whole lot of faith in authorities to enforce standards in the society. And so if they don't enforce them, then people think, okay, well, we need to involve the police, or we engage in mob justice, and we shun the person or put pressure on the local authorities to ban somebody, or things like that. How do we have real accountability for, and what happens to somebody who is in a position of authority who violates some code of behavior?
All good questions. Almost, well, as a preliminary, not as an answer to the question, and not as a way of escaping the question, but just as a starting point, you need good governance to begin with. Before you get to the stage of Gopal Das absconded with $20,000 from the treasury. What are we going to do about it? There should be good governance in place, so that these things, so that there's, where was the accounting before we talk about accountability and punishment and all of that? What was your system of government? How is it that someone could put his hand in the till and walk off with $20,000? Did you have proper systems in place? Didn't you have proper oversight, proper review? So that's a first thing. It's real easy to have sloppy governance and then blame the person who got caught or who acted in discrepant fashion, and it's not to be excused. But the first thing is that we have good governance. That's the first thing. Things should be properly. There should be proper systems in place, proper oversight. Again, thoughtfulness in how we do things, so that people aren't. So that we keep this stuff to a minimum. Now, that doesn't answer the question. That's just an observation. The question remains, what do we do when the person is in position of leadership? And it can seem as if you're just saying, well, leaders are our guys, and our guys are our guys. And so the heck with what anyone else thinks. We're drawing the wagons around our people and protecting them. Where do we stand on that? I think it's clear, first of all, that we don't allow continued sin. That is to say, well, you're in a position of authority, and so we don't mind if you go on doing it and doing it and doing it and harming people on and on and on. That's okay with us because we consider you saintly. Even if we do consider you saintly, that doesn't relieve us of our duty of protecting others. So that's the first thing, that we have a duty to perhaps, as we have duties to our own leaders, or to even to fallen people or people who've broken some moral code, we also have the duties to the rest of our people. And we can't let those just go by the wayside. So we have to have, first of all, we need to see to their welfare, their protection, their welfare and their protection, their Krishna consciousness. So that's, again, that doesn't answer the question, but that's just something we can't neglect. We can't say, and it simplifies the question somewhat, or makes the question a little easier, because we're not saying, our people are saintly and therefore we let them get away with murder, and not only murder, but serial murder, even after we know about it. That's just stupid. We have a duty to protect others. That's clear. But as to your original question, which you're sort of coming back with in different forms, when someone has a position of responsibility and is found to be acting discrepantly, sinfully, what is our duty? What should we do? Yeah, that question is, that's still the question that remains. And
Sorry.
well, my goodness, it's 7:56 and that question still remains.
It's not just leaders. I mean, when we tolerate bad behavior in communities, a man who philanders, but he leads a great kirtan, or he gives a great class, or things like that, we look the other way. I've seen many instances of that, until one day somebody gets in a position of authority, or enough people get upset about it and say, we're not going to tolerate this, and then somebody does something. It just seems counterproductive to wait for people to get angry, rather than have standards and policies of meting out justice in a way that everybody feels satisfied, that even the person who does wrong realizes, I did wrong and I deserve this punishment, and I just want to be restored to the community, that sort of thing.
I can say one thing first off, with 3 minutes to go. One thought that comes to mind, and obviously we're not going to exhaust the discussion tonight. One thought that comes to mind is that very often, or too often, we see a sort of adversarial position taken. Someone is the offender, and the government has to go after the offender and see that this person is dealt with, gets his comeuppance, whether to satisfy the public or to satisfy some moral imperative or for whatever the reason is, you know, we have to take it up and stick it to him. And especially in certain circumstances, I felt, this is me, I guess, that a more productive approach is an approach where we take the person on board, as it were, as a contributor to the problem, perhaps as the main contributor, or perhaps not, and say, we have a shared problem. What are we going to do about it? Rather than an us against them, the white hats against the black hats, and you know, the law against the outlaw, where you take it and say, what are we going to do? And where everyone, what shall we say? I don't want to say everyone takes responsibility for the problem, but where it's recognized as a shared question. Because after all, this person is a devotee, or this person has to be considered saintly. So do we just put that aside and go after the person so that we can, you know, show his body hanging from the gallows, and you know, the picture can be spread on Facebook and get a lot of likes? Or do we sort of turn our back on the whole thing and say, well, you know, let's just weather it? Or do we make it a project in which the various parties are involved, not as enemies, although there's, you know, there are situations in which there's natural enmity to be dealt with, but where these things are taken into account, that my devotee has to be considered saintly, that we're not just looking for the appearance of justice, and yet we have to recognize people's pain, people's pain, people's hurt. So how do we deal with that as a community in which the declared offender or supposed offender or accused offender is a part? Not that that person is now set aside and just driven out and excluded, but there's more of a what should I say, a participatory approach. That's a mundane thought. I think it's not an absolute thought. The absolute thought is the one expressed by Krishna, which we need to keep in front of us. That Krishna says, my devotee has to be considered saintly. We can continue this next Thursday if we're not tired of it. It is a large and important topic, and a topic with many sides to it. We haven't talked today about Gopinath Pattanayaka, for example. There's lots more that can be said. If anyone would like to do research over the next week, you know, bring up things or be thinking about things, that would be wonderful. And I think that's, as promised, we haven't resolved anything. But if we've taken the opportunity to think about Krishna's instructions and Prabhupada's examples, and been a little reflective about it, then we've spent our time well. And thank you all very much.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. You know, can we do kirtan for a couple minutes, just because I'm not satisfied with, you know, ending with a, well, you know, we've thought about things carefully. Kendra, could you?
Yeah, Hare Krishna. I just
Yes.
wanted to say, I really felt completely satisfied with the way you ended this. And we were on the edge of our seats. This has been the most engaging discussion yet. Thank you for monitoring it, Maharaj, and being the Shastric Prabhupada director. Yeah, I really appreciate your
Your
leadership
kindness, approve.
on this call. It was right on target. Thumbs up.
Your kindness.
It's an on day. I talked to him.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Gaur Premanande. Here we go.